Okay, so for those following along, this is the Town of Fairfield Board of Housing Committee meeting of Wednesday, January 10th. This is a special meeting occurring in the second floor, not in the old town hall, as well as via Zoom. We do have a forum today with all members in attendance. I'm now starting the floor, so I'll turn things over to you, Chair, for the introductions.
Okay, so the first item of business is to welcome new members, Brian and also Jackie. Great to have you with us. The next item on our list is the minutes. We've actually got 3 meetings for which we want to approve the minutes, I think. Yeah. November, December, and I'm sorry, October, November, and December. So I think do we want to take them as a group, or do we want to take them one by one?
Probably take them individually, so that those who weren't at the meeting could.
Okay.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with the October minutes. These should be in your packet.
Yeah, they should
Yes.
be following, it's December, November, October. Packet, so they go from most recent to older.
I was looking for any of them.
In October, wow, I thought I missed 2. Look at me go.
Does anyone want to make a recommendation on the October minutes? You move, anyone second?
Yep.
I'll second.
Nina, second.
Nina
Yeah,
second.
Nina.
Great, great. All in favor? Very good.
We have
Can't be-
votes in favor and who's abstaining.
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining.
favor?
We have
I think it's
1,
two abstentions.
2, 3,
Well, the new members would have.
4, yeah.
Are we allowed to vote on it? I was here, I was actually here at this one.
You were.
Vote on.
So who was not here besides Bob and Janice?
It was Bob, Janice, and Brian are abstaining.
Okay, well, Brian,
For October.
for October.
So,
Everyone's-
Approved unanimously, 3.
Okay, next is the November 10th meeting. 8th meeting. Recommendation on these minutes, from anyone?
Even Nina, you wanna
Yeah.
make a
No,
motion in second? There you go.
A second? Me? All in favor? Approved.
I abstain.
Bob, Janice, and Brian.
Then finally, we have the December 13th meeting. I had a couple very minor items on this, but before I say anything, does anyone want to comment? On
You're gonna put a motion on the
I'll
table.
put a motion on,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think just a couple things. I think there's reference to, it's actually Woodrow, 110 Woodrow. As opposed to Woodward.
Missed that somewhere.
Yes.
Woodrow.
So it's-
must have put it in that way.
It's the 5th paragraph.
Yep, make that correction.
This is a minor thing. I under new business, second bullet, I thought it was actually Steve that made that recommendation, but, does that sound right, Steve?
It talks about extending the term.
Investigate possible changes to the model deed restriction language.
I make that one often, yes.
I wouldn't have suggested
Yes, you
except
do.
fixing Woodrow, so. Anything else?
Okay, with those corrections, so that's okay.
Sure.
You want to second that? Yeah, more conversation.
So we have a recommendation on the amended from
Yeah.
Bob.
Mhm.
Do we have a second? Steve seconded, all in favor?
Yep.
Okay, approve it.
Just
Uh,
me.
It's Nina,
With Janice.
Janice, Nina, and Brian.
Okay, I didn't, Chris, I didn't, introduce you.
We didn't introduce it.
Yeah, so. You want to introduce your?
Yeah, Chris Russo, with Russo and Rizzio LLC. I'm here. I represent the applicant who filed for the fee and lieu payment. Thanks about it.
We'll go to very shortly.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Brian, do you know everyone around the table?
Steve and by email or.
Okay.
I'm
Would that
Janice.
be okay, Mr. Chair, if we introduce everyone?
Absolutely, sounds great. So Nina, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Nina Velez and I don't know, maybe you guys would see it.
Member of the committee.
Member of the committee, that
I knew this guy. Bob Ellinger, remember? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it has.
Janice Bulabasis.
Gretchen Gertner, I'm the secretary, recording secretary
Lucky you.
for 20 years or so.
Sorry, my phone is ringing in my ear. Jackie Page
Yeah, I heard you,
was there sitting next to Steve at the meeting.
All right, great, Steve and our chair.
Mark Barnhart, your staff person.
Very faithful. Okay, next item we have is election of officers.
Yeah, the meeting schedule.
Meeting schedule.
Oh,
We'll have to have special meetings every
Meeting
month.
schedule. Meeting schedule, so.
That way, you didn't set the schedule last year. We weren't able to set the.
Correct.
We didn't have one to set the-
We have a forum.
So the next in your packet is the proposed 2024 meeting schedule, which continues the current meeting date of the second Wednesday of each month at 7 o'clock.
And you double checked holidays and.
I believe I did.
I have a comment.
Okay,
you don't want to be here for Valentine's Day?
Well,
we can always move it.
right. I'm just thinking, I'm thinking in advance. Would that be okay? If we-
Yeah, if we.
I
so we
mean-
can always,
Love should win out.
Unless I bring my husband and this is date night.
Well, I'm sure you'd love that.
Mine would not like it.
Right, I just,
What we can do is we can adopt the meeting schedule.
All right.
We can also we can cancel it and have a special meeting the date that we discussed.
okay,
So that's fine. And I'll just work with Herb to figure out a date and we'll just pick another Wednesday, I suppose.
Okay.
Make a motion, we approve the schedule for 2024.
And
I
what
will
about-
s- I
and
will
same
circle.
thing with like September 11th?
Well, it is, but it's not a holiday per se.
it's not date night,
Huh?
not date.
And you know, we do,
But-
we adopt the meeting schedule for all 12 months. We may
Right.
not meet in August, for example, or July. Sometimes it's, you know, with people's vacation schedules, we're just. But it's good to have a meeting schedule in place for the 12 months.
So I'll second Brian's.
All in favor then?
Circle the 14th to 15th.
Unanimous.
Sorry.
My wife will appreciate that too.
So then we have election of officers. So I think what we need a chair for 2024. And then the question is, we need a secretary.
Well, technically, you need a chair and a secretary. We've had traditionally also a vice chair, you know, to step in and serve, well, if the chair's not here, just to run the meeting. And the secretary is not as critical, but it is, I think, what the RTM, they recommend or require that the secretary be posted. It's just more ceremonial here, because we don't have a lot of official acts that the secretary would have to attest to. Traditionally what they
And
do.
it can't be the same person.
I don't think so. I mean, some people, let's spread the wealth around.
Okay, well, I'll nominate Herb for chair.
I second.
Other nominations?
You're doing a great job.
Appreciate your confidence.
Seriously, you really are.
Well, thanks. This is a great group to work with. So, all in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Okay, thank you again. So next would be vice chair.
I nominate Steve.
And why are we doing the vice chair?
Well, as we can. Had a vice chair before.
Well, all right, that's fine.
It's helpful. It is helpful. I
Yeah.
can't be here.
All right. Thank you, Okay.
All in favor of Steve as vice chair?
Yes. And we do need a secretary. so-
Unanimous. Okay, so nomination for secretary.
Ben was our secretary, so we do
Oh,
need a
was she?
secretary, yeah. Would you like to do that, Nina?
Okay, can I just ask a question first, Richard, that the secretary does not have to act like the secretary?
We have an actual
The recording.
secretary.
Yeah.
There is an administrative
What
rank.
would I have to do?
I think
Before.
Not much.
I think it's
Okay.
If
nothing.
there is an official
Nothing?
action by the board, you would attest that that was the act of the commission,
We do that.
which would be in the minutes,
I
which
think-
would be in the minutes, right?
There hasn't been one in all the years.
it's not too taxing.
Yeah.
Not too taxing.
Right, okay.
You're an officer.
Put that on your resume.
All in favor of Nina as secretary? Congratulations, Nina.
Yeah.
Okay, next item we have is payment in lieu of version amendment. So Chris, welcome. And you want to come up?
Sure, where would you like me? Little pair?
Yeah, that's a great word.
So in your packet, there is the draft of the regulation amendment that this committee had worked on and presented, which we had talked with or shared with and also a copy of the proposed text amendment that Chris filed on behalf of his client for 250, correct?
Correct. People are Realty LLC, yep.
So, you have a copy. I don't know if I've ever had a chance to review it. I don't know if you guys want to just.
Sure. And I know you, and thank you for having me tonight. I know this is a topic that's been discussed a number of times. I was actually involved when the first time go around that this happened a few years ago, and I know at that time it was different. The Housing Trust Fund, I think, had only been established for maybe months when that first regulation was proposed. You didn't see so many of these fee in lieu provisions in some of the other towns. Now you find them in a number of other towns having this type of provision. So it's similar to what was presented. I know Attorney Rizzio was here a few months ago on it. So it's similar to that, that would, in lieu of below market rate units, which is how it's defined in the Fairfield zoning regulations, that the commission at its discretion, the Planning and Zoning Commission at its discretion, would be able to allow an applicant to pay this fee to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in lieu of creation of those units. But it's only for sale units. It's not for rental. There's actually a line in here that makes that clear that it's only for sale units, not for rental units. And it tries to reiterate that it's in their absolute discretion where they feel a criminal legacy is desirable in public interest. It is a one-time fee, regardless of the size of the unit. And it's equal to, now what we proposed originally when Attorney Rizzio was here, he presented one that was for 200% multiplied by the current area median income for a family of 4 in the Bridgeport HUD Metro Rent area at the time of submission of the application. This one, I think it's partially based on the, the meeting that he had here In this draft, we proposed 250%. I know, Mark's talked about 300, it's 320%, as another option for that. And then the final part that it states is that these payments would be just deposited into the trust fund prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy.
Occupancy or issuance?
The zoning permit,
Zoning permit?
which I think would come at the same time around, was the certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
But, and then, so what do you want me to go into the argument for it and why we're proposing it and?
Well, we covered, I mean, we covered that at some depths in, when he was here, I think maybe in August. So I'm not sure we need to rehash that unless any of the new members have a question. Brian, you'd like to?
Yeah, I would
Some
really
explanation?
find it eliminating, I mean, especially given that the new language is supposed to 320, which I have questions about that too, but how you came up with that, but I certainly want to see why.
Well, and I think I could probably go through the argument for the fee in lieu. I mean, at the end of the day, and this commission has done, this committee has done a lot of work. The town has done a lot of work for the creation of affordable units, which is obviously a very laudable goal in the town. But at the heart of it is the person who needs the affordable housing. And it seems like the situation for sale units can really have the potential to harm people who need affordable housing. The way that I think Attorney Rizzio presented, which has been a common argument, is that once for a for sale unit, especially if it was in a condominium setup, you could, somebody who qualified for affordable housing and then purchased the affordable dwelling unit would then still be susceptible to association fees and special assessments that they could not afford and possibly not afford. That and that you know, and that they would be in danger then of being default. So you get this affordable housing unit, you are setting up your home, and then at some point, maybe a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, you could run into a situation where you end up being in default. The other edge of that, because I do think it's and I apologize for the, I can't think of another phrase to term this, but damned if you do, damned if you don't, because the other end of it that I was thinking about that I don't think Attorney Rizzio pointed out was, let's say there was a decision by the condominium association to make it a gated community. And an assessment came along for all the units there and it was $5,000 per unit. And maybe at that point, the person who is the affordable unit owner, rather than not paying it and going into default, decide, you know what, actually, I do have 5,000 at this time, and I'm gonna pay for this improvement. For them though, say they pay the $5,000. Well, everybody else in the condominium that's in a market rate unit would enjoy the benefits of the investment if they ever had to resell the unit. So now I could, if I was a market rate unit owner, all right, I'm in a gated community. So I'm going to sell this. I'm going to sell it for a greater amount, made an investment into the property. And when I resell, that's going to be a feature I'm going to try to market. The affordable unit owner does not have that option. They are still constricted. So no matter whether they've invested $5,000 into it, or even if they put $100,000 into it, it would not matter as far as the resale price. They wouldn't be able to say, you owe, you know, this is the affordable formula plus you owe me 5,000 because I did it. So they're caught in a position where, yes,
Just because they're deed restricted, is that?
Yeah, they would, so I don't know if it's as extreme, but it's a good point that it, yes, because it's restricted in terms of resale.
But it'd be no different if it was a land trust holding or.
Yeah, we run into this, because you're not able to fully recoup that investment, but that typically happens anyway with.
But by the same token, they may not be, get into that thing for, so it's an if.
There's a risk either way. I mean, when you put $40,000 to renovate your kitchen, do you get 40,000 back on resale? Maybe, maybe not. Oftentimes it's depreciated, you don't get the full value of that. There's a much greater potential that, you know, maybe not get the full value, there's much greater potential you wouldn't get the full value with a restricted unit. But, you know, I would argue that there's some risk with market. Way I look at payment in lieu, sorry, Steve.
I just, a quick legal question that, could the condo docs be drafted so that if there was an assessment, the affordable unit would not be hit with the assessment?
I have not seen anything to that, and I think the concern would be, could the condo units then cut out the
I didn't say cut out. I
unit?
didn't say cut
Yeah,
out.
see, I mean, that's,
Build them.
Or they could be prorated.
you know, so I don't know if they could, like, for instance, like soundproof windows, which is becoming a feature that we're seeing a lot with, you know, any developments that are near the train or the, or the highway. I don't know if they could do it and say, and they might be out of compliance with the Affordable Act if they did not improve.
No, I think, yeah,
Yeah, I think
the units would have to be comparable. The question, I think, is whether or not you could, you know, if there was 12 units, for example, could you spread the assessment around the 11 units that are not the market rate units essentially and cut. So there are probably workarounds. I think the way I view it is common to have fairly common to have a payment in lieu. When we drafted the original inclusionary zoning language, we purposely did not provide for that. We wanted the units to be created throughout town as part of a market rate development, private development. So we did discuss, you know, providing an option to create those units offsite elsewhere within town, or providing a payment in lieu option. And we opted to take the simpler approach, partly because one, we get the full benefit of the unit at the time which the development is made. We also get that development as part of a mixed income community. And it's scattered throughout town as natural market forces dictate, you know, in terms of where those developments should occur. So all those things are true. We have seen, you know, for sale has some issues. I don't care how you craft, you know, build the mousetrap, there's always going to be some issues along the way. You've seen that with town property that is subject to covenants and restrictions to maintain the resale, to have a cap on the resale to maintain it as affordable. It has been somewhat pronounced. We didn't have a workaround. There weren't any provisions in that condominium that I'm familiar with. Westway was the example that we brought before the board. You had, you know, units that were comparable, selling for $1.5 million, and the affordable units were selling as they should for $200,000. So there is a dichotomy there. The situation that Chris is describing, you know, could happen. The way, you know, this is really a tool, and it would be a tool for the town to use at its discretion. It wouldn't have to exercise that option. But, you know, what is the appropriate formula to buy out of it? And so I think part of it is, how much does it cost to create an affordable unit someplace in town, and whether the formula provides for that or not. And some, you know, one way to look at it, I think Chris and Chris had brought this up before, is look at what other communities are doing, and that can be somewhat instructive in terms of this, but some communities completely devalue this and accept absurdly low payments in lieu. So it's really a couple things.
Do it because it's an option.
It's an option.
And the more valuable the option is to you, then you adjust your price accordingly. That's important. I've not, I did some reading. I read Urban Institute's piece on it and the Land Health Institute. I really didn't see multiple of AMI as formula in any of those documents. I was kind of curious why not cost of creation or, you know, something that's just more tied to the one for the developer's perspective, right? Or, you know, and that would float, if you do an annual, like, what's the average square footage? Yeah, it just seems sort of weird because it does, ours is, we don't care what the size of the unit is. Yeah, how did you?
There's a lot of different ways of, you know, to be perfectly blunt.
Yeah.
When Westway came up, we had agreed on a purchase pilot payment that would be represented that we were gonna take to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we worked into a formula that would adjust every year based on something that's published by HUD. There's no argument. This is the area median income for this area,
Right now.
as opposed to what is the construction cost? You know, you ask 5 different people, you might get 5 different answers. So even the building official may have a, you know, different take on that. So it was more of a published factor, but we did back into a number. I do think it would be better that we have a more rational basis for the formula. It has, just in terms of compliance, I would argue for something that is fairly, you know, the federal government does publish this. Hopefully the federal government's not going to have business and we're going to continue to publish this, but some of the stuff that I've seen in the past, you know, it gets a little squirrely because it doesn't, you know, they changed the formula, the industry that they're using. So it's something that has some longevity, that does adjust over time. But I do think it should be, from my perspective, and that's all up to you guys, is that there should be some relationship to, you know, if we wanted to create that unit someplace else in town, we need to be able to do that in some fashion.
Yeah, that's thank you, that's very important, so, and I get it, that all makes sense. But then if we're just constantly gonna be backbid. Which, by the way, I'm not saying I don't know anything about your development, so. And like I said, because we're not saying anything about square footage or location, like, yeah, we just have this 320 times AMI, so it's a set dollar amount. I have no idea what it costs for, you know, for you to build it or to build it somewhere else. But it does seem like we'd get a lot of, you know, prayers for relief. So say in the courts, where it'll say, hey, you know, can we do 250 or two, because, you know what I mean? So I'm like, it's kind of like, well, pick your poison, because if we're gonna go with 320, but then base this every single time, it's kind of weird. But anyway, it's like, I guess right now you guys have to decide, but maybe I can ponder on some other.
I don't think we need to decide this tonight. I think this is going to be go to a public hearing.
It is gonna go to public hearing.
And that'll probably be sometime in February,
Hope so.
March.
February, hopefully.
Well, you got 110 Woodrow. that's-
Yeah, I know.
So at the TP&Z. That's where that public hearing.
So
Yeah.
so Chris on
Filed with-
has filed this text amendment on behalf of his client. They're proposing an 18 unit.
18 unit, yep.
18 unit for sale development on Pequot Avenue in Southport, for which they've already secured a variance and have the
Correct. And wetlands
support of
and WPT.
Southport Conservancy, I guess.
They don't support
support it, so you're not
applications.
gonna-
That's not something they do,
Okay.
but yeah, we've met with them and we
You've
incorporated
done
all this
outreach.
change.
Okay.
Correct.
So they'll need to, along with the text amendment, you're presenting a site application. special
Correct, yeah,
permit
special permit,
application
yeah.
for this development.
Right.
And so I think, you know, this committee should weigh in on the text amendment as well as the development. I think the development is a good one.
Yeah.
If they have anything to say as to the text amendment, then we should.
Well, can I this is for sale only, not for rental,
Correct.
but it's at the commission's sole discretion, so why limit it to for sale? It's at their discretion, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to say anything about it.
Sure, okay.
No pining, but, so I think the number maybe should even be a little higher because, I like to have the units where the development is. And if the commission was going to let a developer do a fee in lieu, then maybe it should be 110% of whatever the number is, or 120%. Because it is sort of. Pardon?
110 or 120% of what?
Well, like if you use Chris's math and you're at 260,000, which is low, but if you're at that, then up to be 110 of that or 120 of that or something.
Well, he's taken 2.5,
Yeah.
250% of the area median income, which actually is not the correct area median income, but
Sorry,
leave that aside for the moment.
the,
Yeah, you don't have the current one, so that's.
oh, no, yeah, I just did, right, it's just an example.
Yeah. So I would suggest if we're gonna, and again, there's different, as Brian said, there's different ways to do a formula. I just think we want something that does adjust, that is reflective of the cost to produce housing.
And it's simple.
And can be applied across, it's a formula that's fairly easy to understand, I think.
And from the perspective of the developer, this flat fee in lieu of number is a lot more attractive in some situations than others, right? If we're talking about Westway, for instance, versus a development where we're building $500,000 housing.
Build the unit as part of it.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if there shouldn't be some relationship between what that cost differential is between market and affordable.
Well, that's what that's what I would argue in favor of a higher value formula, because it only makes sense for a developer, a builder, and a very high value. If you're selling the units for $2 million, then you can pay out a $500,000.
It should be higher, but
Yeah.
what about rather than a flat number, what about a number that's dependent upon what that delta is between market cost and affordable?
Again, how are you gonna determine that delta?
With
At the time,
with the
but you-
judgment, I'm not suggesting that this be a pure formula, but it seems like we at least should have maybe brackets in terms of.
Can I just, how we came to the
Sure.
number and the percentage? So, I filed this under Pequot Realty LLC. I think if I told my clients who I know are coming in, with similar type of for sale developments, they would probably have joined on this application as well. And so right now we have an application that's in Southport. But I think there are other applications that will be coming that are not in Southport. So it is tough because we have one fee and it's covering a whole town that has a wide range there. I did not see, and I don't know if you saw any town that had differentiated by parts of town. I think I don't know if that's because of a legal issue that cropped up, that why nobody has done it, but I did not find an example of it. I looked.
Certain districts, like they excluded 2 to 3 acre districts in some towns.
Yeah, I have seen where they excluded certain zones, but I haven't seen where the fee changes
There's a,
by.
actually, the federal government uses a payment standard that's for the Housing Choice Voucher Program that's based on zip code.
And
But that's a rental assistance program.
And as far as the number, so the easiest way I thought to kind of come up with the number was to just look at other Fairfield County suburb towns and just look at and see what they had. So the ones that I looked at, I had Westport and I have copies of these if you want to see them, then you can also find them out. But so Westport's fee comes out to just $249,750. It's more math than I'm skilled at.
Okay.
It's a complicated way that they did there.
What does that work?
It's a income family of 4 equals 111,000 times 225%. Equals 250.
Number one.
Yeah, I don't mind 825.
It ended up being 250 per unit. 250K per unit.
Gotcha.
New Canaan's was 300% of state median income for a family of 4. And then Darien, the number in the regulation came out to 163,000 per unit. But the only thing about that, it's an older regulation. the family of four is at 90,600, which I think is really, it's a really old
It's based on the family or two.
family of four, yes.
Okay.
State median income of.
I think they told me that they're just not doing it there, but I mean, it's on the book, it's on the books, but.
It's on, but and it would be increased from that number because that's only 90,600 and it's now going up. So,
Use comps.
so we use comps and I mean, essentially the number came out to, I think it would be higher than what Westport requires. So, and those are communities, you know, I think they're wealthier communities than we are as far as home values. And so that's where originally thought the 200% number was appropriate in comparison to them. Again, considering their economics, but now have increased it to 250. I have not seen anything at the level of 320.
Westport, Darien, New Canaan are all part of the Stanford, Norwalk, MFI. Fairfield is part of the Bridgeport FFI. So the area median income in Westport for the south is much higher than it is here. And that's statewide, we're less than the statewide median income. So the statewide median income currently for a family of four is under 19,500. Bridgeport, Fairfield, it's 117,400. So, I think everyone's kind of using a similar type approach, although I have seen other approaches used where they do try to equate it to construction costs.
And that's
things
where,
like
I mean, if
that.
you look at these regs, I mean, it's that I'm telling you the end number, the way they get there is different on all of them.
So I'll shut up, but. Listening to what Herb said and Steven. Just the big picture, I think that the nuance here is that the better your overriding plan is. So forget about like the payment in lieu, but just say, hey, what are our overall goals? Which, I read the annual report, sort of what the mission of this group is. Because like I said, you have this option and it's the money's gonna go into this fund and you're gonna be able to do things, which I think is great. So I'm not saying I'm not a fan of the payment in lieu. But really how you size and price that option should really be, and also even where you allow it to occur, right? When you said certain places are allowed, not, that's because you sit back as a group and go, and even bounce it off the RTM or whoever else you want, TP&Z, because this really is sort of maybe even a zoning thing, say, and I'm not advocating for redlining or anything, but I mean, like, just really think, are there areas because of, depending on the type of affordable housing we're aiming at, if it's for seniors, if it's for new families, if it's for, we truly want to get into seriously affordable, right? You want those in certain places, right? You want them by transit, you want them by access to services and food and whatnot. And so how you shape that in an overriding document, so that when you come with it, you're like, well, hey, where is this thing? Oh, it's going to be on High Street, which, look, I'm not making a political statement on High Street, but I thought that was an amazing location for affordable housing, whether for any demographic, whether it's for seniors or for, because it's in a fantastic place. So I would have been like, I would have bent over backward, I was like, yeah, we really, right, we want that housing built there. So your option, you change, depending on where it is in town or access to things that, and then it gets away from all the qualitative wishy-washy stuff. Cause like, well, based on our plan, this is where we said we want density or where we want whatever the thing is, and then go with that. And I think look, that's a big concept. It might involve other boards, but to me, it makes it sort of less arbitrary. When I say arbitrary, I mean, it's not, you're saying something that's fixed and is a measurable number, but I actually think you should fine tune it or give yourself a rubric that you follow, because then you'll get the outcomes that you want.
I do think you need a formula that you can apply across the board so it's fair, applied fairly. I do think that there is, not all housing It needs to be an apartment building built next to transit, so we are trying to build also starter homes in town. The only way we
Middle
really
house.
do that is for the town to actually own the property or another nonprofit to own the property. And then to construct single family or two-family homes that are ownership opportunities. And so, and they could be located anywhere in town. That's an appropriate location for that. And so I think we have a couple things here. First of all, they've made the application, planning and zoning, we'll hear it. So we have to decide whether or not we want to provide any comment on the proposal. And I think if we do, it's, are we generally predisposed or in favor of providing the Planning and Zoning Commission with an additional tool to allow them at their discretion, based on some input from this body, whether they should do a payment in lieu or have a payment in lieu option for sale units? And then what is the appropriate formula behind that? And I think, you know, there's a whole range. What Chris did was entirely appropriate to understand what other communities are doing and why reinvent the wheel. But I think there's also, you know, an argument to be had in terms of, you know, if we get the money and we wanted to create a unit of housing, what would it cost for us to do that? And not that we have to get 100% value, that would be nice, but we should get close to something that we can actually do something with, because the argument against not creating the unit on site at the time of development is it sits in a housing trust fund and you don't get the benefit of the housing, which is the argument that Stanford is dealing with, because they've done a lot of payment in lieu for market rate developments. And then people are saying, well, what are you doing with the housing? What are you doing to actually create the units? And so it's harder, because then you have to find a site, find a developer, and then you have that delta that you're dealing with, because it's not gonna pencil out at 260, not gonna pencil out even at 400 in terms of building ground up. You might be able to do it at 400, a single family home, but you have to actually own the land, because the land itself is gonna be the hardest thing here. So those are the questions. Whether we wanna comment, we'll have probably another meeting before we have to come up with something, I think. And then,
I think the main
what
point
do you say?
tonight was really to get Chris's
Yeah.
presentation and perspective, and have some, you know, follow-up discussion with the new committee. And I think we're gonna need to take some time to think through whatever recommendation. I think we will wanna make a recommendation to the,
Steve found this, so you can add that to your.
Yeah, and the only thing, if I could just, you know, what I keep bringing back to in all the discussions I've had about this being moved is because I know there is this daunting goal of creating affordable dwelling units and we need to create all these. But I think it comes back to that these for sale, certain situations for sale can be very problematic to the people who end up owning these units. And that this regulation is almost a protection. And that's why in this language, we tried to be as clear as possible that there was absolute discretion because with the commission. So there may be a for sale situation where it just does not make sense. And so that's a time, you know, that you would just require the unit and ignore the fee. And so, and if you look at the reg, I think we repeated it like 2 or 3 times to make it clear. This is an absolute discretion situation. If it doesn't, if it should be an affordable unit instead of a fee in lieu, then they have the ability to do that.
Or what I passed out is work that Steve had done. He found Richfield had recently adopted an amendment to their regs to provide for inclusionary zoning. It does provide payment in lieu. It does provide a formula by which to calculate that. And it's 300. Yeah. So, you know, we have a range here, so we just need to think about how we want to respond. Again, we don't have to do that this evening. I think it's helpful.
I have a question for Chris. So, in addition to the fee of lieu, you could provide a unit off-site.
Not under this scenario.
Not under what we provide, but I have seen that.
I'm wondering why you didn't provide that as an option.
I mean, I think we're open to it. I do see, it's tricky to administer. I think it's a lot more, I don't know.
We went through this with the Planning and Zoning Commission, you remember with regard to Westway, so we had actually presented that as an option too. And then the discussion was, well, where's the unit being created? Is it comparable to the unit here in Southport? You know, you're proposing units elsewhere in town, even though you're proposing 3 units for 1 unit.
Right.
They're over in Kings Highway, that's not appropriate, that's not equivalent to Southport, so it just opened up.
You know, and is it available at the time? There are timeframes.
Again, it's at the,
It goes to your, like, what is our overall, you know, goal, and, you know, and what sort of, yeah, like, where are we, I mean, cause I get their question, but I mean, if you told me I get a 3-for-1, Steven.
I was firmly in favor of doing 3 for 1 because it's 3 units,
Yeah.
as opposed to 1. So, you know, I thought that was a fair trade. But
So what they did do, I'm sorry, Westway's the one over by the library?
Westway, yeah,
Yep, just beyond it.
And so actually the units are on site.
they're on site. We do have a deed restriction. There's some question as to the income eligibility of some of the people that are there. Was a little bit of inside dealing, allegations at least. So it is, I mean, I have a deed restriction. We have a deed restriction.
Yeah.
But there is some litigation involved in whether or not they went through the appropriate process.
So my concern with all of this, Chris, is that your clients are in the business of providing housing and we're not, and the town is not. And so you give us 300,000, it is gonna take us 7 years to spend it and it'll cost probably
Not the way you go.
I'm surprised he doesn't have his HP 12C here. He's not gonna the original.
So you're transferring the difficulties of development to an entity that doesn't have the ability to move quickly and, you know, it's harder for us.
And I think, I know that was an issue when we first came with the first time, there was that question of, you know, the housing trust fund had just been set up. I don't think it had spent any money at that point and hadn't done anything at that point. Now the trust fund is something, when you pull a building permit now, you feed into it, right? So it's something that is getting fed into regularly. And I think you are using it
Yes.
right now for the project for Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah,
So it is, you know, and hopefully there'll be more of that. And, you know, and that's one, I mean, that's for sale, isn't it?
Yes.
So that's obviously one, I think, where you know, obviously wouldn't take the fee in lieu on that one. You would just do it, you know, and something like that. And I could see other types of for sale developments, I think, where just based on how they were structured or how they were developed, where it wouldn't make sense to take the fee in lieu, that you would just get the units and still feel that the unit owners were protected. But I think it seems like the housing trust fund's been established now, obviously, for some years. It is the funds are starting to be expended, so I do think there's value to adding to it. Even though I understand, you know, you're not developing the units.
It just, you know, as you know, it takes 3 to 5 years to develop something.
How big are the units in the your development?
Oh, in the Pequot, I think there's about 2,200 is about the average.
2 or 3 bedrooms. 2
Yeah.
bedrooms, 2 bedrooms,
So you know, actually, what will end up being approved is 18, well, I shouldn't say that back on. Hopefully it gets approved. But it creates the floor area for it. Maybe that would, you know, maybe somebody would end up buying, you know, 2 units and combining or something like that. But right now it's 18 units and they're 2,200 is the average.
110.
250.
250.
It's the old Russo Radiology building. It's now
It was the
Challenge.
Challenge was in it.
It's their workout
That's what I
place.
thought. Right by the track.
Yeah.
It's actually a good, you know, it has, you know, with the grade change.
I'm very familiar, that's why I was.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank
That was fairly painless for you. Yeah, really.
Not only enough, I'll get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, we blew our time budget. So do we want to move on and?
I think the other most important thing tonight is to look at the annual report, make any revisions to it, hopefully. Develop a path going forward so we can deliver this to the RTM and so you can make your appearance.
Mark, just one quick, how did you come up with 320%?
So the 320 was kind of backed into, if I had to do it completely from scratch, I would pick a round number, like 300, 350, 325, something like that. There is another approach, which is, dollar per square foot or something like that. A lot of communities are using this because the relationship to the AMI, because it is published by the federal government, something that's really easy to understand. It's just what's the appropriate number that produces value. But to answer your question, like I said to Brian, when we were talking to Westway, you come before the committee, we had several conversations with the developer of Westway. This was after the development was built. This was kind of first of all, it was settled. It was a settlement to begin with. This was the subsequent developer, the initial developer sold that, and the inclusionary zoning provision was applied in between and then was applied retroactively as a condition of approving the project. So there's some backstory here. He came in and we said, okay, the argument against it is as Steve articulated. You get the unit at the time of the development, it scatters throughout town as opposed to putting into a fund someplace. But giving the commission a tool, eventually the committee was persuaded. We had negotiated a fee, which was like $350 or something, $360,000. So I backed into a formula that we could then use prospectively on other projects. And that's what we went forward with, 320%. It came out during the public hearing that unbeknownst to us, and as we were going through the process, he sold the unit to himself. And once the commission heard that, that was the end of the story. So, and again, he was the administrator, his firm was the administrator of the development. But he demonstrated that he was an income eligible buyer, which I question. So the sale price was appropriate. He did sell it at the appropriate price, but he sold it to himself. That was the rest is history. So that's why we're in litigation.
Rented a unit that was followed.
And the subsequent one was sold. Yeah, so there are questions regarding how the development was administered.
So it goes into our zoning regs. Okay, yeah.
So it is a zoning regulation and the zoning commission would administer it. And in this case, I think the commission, planning and zoning commission would ask for the advice of the spot.
And then if for changes, is it a big deal to go like, do these zoning regs,
they can change at any time. Yeah. But, and so I do think if we're gonna comment on this, we should probably have some cogent argument as to why we came up with, as opposed to, I backed into the number. I mean, we're gonna come up with a formula that has some relationship, either as they suggested, based on what other communities are doing, or some relationship to what it costs to produce a unit, something that would make a.
Inherently, if we get the money, call it 300,000, we can't build for a couple of years. And so with inflation, then it's 350,000, And so we're always going to be on the short end of it if we do that.
I think, the other thing you would say is you don't want this to be so low in terms of the formula, everyone's going to
Right.
push for the commission to do this in lieu of creating the unit. You want it to extract a penalty somewhat, it want to be somewhat painful that they don't want to do this unless they really have no choice.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you want to set it too low.
Right.
I think you want to extract some pain point there. Yeah, but I think you have to figure out what that is.
Because you really, you basically, you know exactly what roughly it's costing them and you can dial, you can dial it right into that. And
We can come up with a number. It's just, this is gonna sit in posterity, so you just wanna make sure that you know what the number is now, what will it be in the future, and with the same two people come up with the same number, formula type thing.
Your 320% came out to like 400,000.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a pretty good number,
Mhm.
It's getting close, yeah. As I said, you probably 320 seems a little weird, right? So, maybe one like 300, other people has like round numbers, 300, 350, 400, 250, something like that.
50.
Anyway, you think about it.
well, interesting, you had your annual report at the same time. Yeah, I saw both documents roughly at the same time. It's interesting to look at the historical data around where homes are selling at, right? Which are, there are multiple of median income. And, homes are from a developer and I'm thinking about building one, they're all linked, right? So it's kind of like, if you tie what your where home sales are going, because that's probably a pretty good proxy. So I mean, I don't think 320 is bad either. I think there's multiples that are in that data there. So that's another, nugget for thought for how it adds up that number, whatever. Sort of moving along before homes actually transact. So thanks. Sorry I took all the time, but
So just on the affordable housing plan, I think you guys all saw the draft. I'm sorry.
Another quick thing that, in the Ridgefield, they had incentives built into their inclusionary zoning. And I'll just mention, there's the density bonus, there's relaxation of dimension and bulk, and there's a reduction in parking, which I think is very interesting.
This is which town, Steve?
Ridgefield.
okay. Or that could be key for some of the stuff.
There's a lot of detail about, they're thinking about not including rentals versus confining this to the sales and, in this information that they sent us, in case you haven't had a chance to look at, there's a lot of the rationale, the thinking in this. And it's,
Which you covered.
yeah, he covered, he gave us the executive summary.
Thumbnail sketch. Yeah.
So should we pivot to the,
Yeah, so
The
this,
annual
the
report.
annual report kind of follows the same format that we've used the last few years. So there's a summation of what's in the affordable housing plan in terms of primary goals. Some of the work that you've done this past year in bullet point form. Statistical analysis of some key data points, and then we do need to provide an update, report on the status of the housing trust fund. And we've included in there is how we're progressing toward our moratorium application in terms of housing and utility. So all that, I talked to Herb a little bit about whether or not we need to change it up and make it a little bit more glitzy. We could actually do that as part of a PowerPoint presentation, the RTM. There's more graphs and pictures from the affordable housing, the ADU workshop, for example, and other things that we did. But the report, anyway, you had some thoughts and comments.
yeah, I thought that we could actually say a little bit more about some of the things that we've done. And I didn't make copies of this, but so I suggested a couple of additional possible bullets. We'd like to see what everybody thinks of this. One I had was identify properties that may lend themselves to future town purchasing, repurposing, or middle housing. I mean, Mark's been doing a lot of that. We've been talking about a lot of these different possibilities, at the committee level. And it's really been a key part of our thrust toward middle housing.
This is for the 2 to 4 family units, and it's the housing that Bob has put together.
In large part, and Mark was also.
It's-
Some, but yeah.
Yeah, it's that, it's also part of that, that Zone B, Zone C study
Mhm.
work that we've done.
Yeah.
So I just thought that maybe this would be a bullet to capsulize some of that work and another one.
Can you explain quickly for Brian, since he wasn't involved with some of the prior stuff?
BC, like what-
The blighted properties that we'd identified and.
Yeah, well, if we're gonna talk about the properties in distress, whatever we call it, Bob's probably the better person to speak to that.
Yeah, we've kind of focused on zone B where we can increase density without a lot of opposition apparently. But there are, I mean, just driving around visually, you look at dilapidated houses in need of a lot of care. And when we look at that and you look at the field card and you do a little digging in terms of the owner, you see they own multiple properties. Sometimes they're not living there, it's a rental, or no one's there, it's vacant. And so I think it could lead and has led to discussions that Mark has had with several of the property owners who are either underwater, they're in foreclosure or about to, or they're elderly, and the place is in such disrepair that they're down. And so you kind of look and see, are there opportunities for us to identify these and work with the owner to perhaps purchase property and add a duplex or triplex in zone B, for example, where you could, by regulation, you would need a variance. So we've got, I don't know, about a dozen of these. I've got a spreadsheet.
That's great.
And they're spread out pretty much throughout town, not
Pretty much.
southward.
It's pretty much along the 95 corridor, where you'd expect.
Surprised they exist.
It's nothing Greenfield Hill.
Yeah, it hasn't, the idea really was to try to identify opportunities to purchase acquisition opportunities in town and looking at a couple data points to determine what properties might be susceptible to change or an offer. And it's kind of what a developer would do, driving around.
Saying their tax lien.
Saying, hey, what's that situation there? It looks a little, maybe they're behind on their taxes, maybe they're on the blight list, that type of thing.
Yeah,
So
we had a kind of a working group, a subset of this committee, and we sort of prioritized, and I think 5 or 6 of them seem to be most appealing to, that bears further watch and see what happens. And we're certainly open as you drive around town. If you see others, let me know what they are, and I'll be glad to add them to our inventory. But
That's great. And you're saying that's not in the, like, to put that to the.
yeah,
It's interesting.
kind of
Yeah,
very early stages, so yeah.
but it does tie into the work we're doing on B and C.
So
The
developers
B
are
and
gonna see
C,
that and go try and find out where they are so they can get in front of you.
the B and C, I guess I probably envision in the second bullet, which is studied potential zoning revisions that would be supportive of middle housing. So Mark kind of launched this probably about 1.5 years ago, when he had an intern working with him.
Yeah.
And so we Steve and I were plugged into this as well. I'm not sure, Bob, you were, but Steve and I were definitely plugged into this with Mark and the intern Ben. And we looked at, we did some sort of what if analysis based upon these properties. And then in addition, beyond that, I went and actually looked at aggregating these properties into buckets and found that a lot of the current Zone B properties, there are a lot of properties that are not in Zone B that meet the eligibility, which is 9,000 square feet, plus some other setback requirements. There are a lot of properties that are.
A simple way to put it is that most of them are not.
Non-conforming. There are hundreds of non-conforming properties.
Currently in a zone B, you need 9,000 square foot lot under our regulations, a 9,000 square foot lot to build a precinct. So at least 50% of the duplexes that currently exist within the zone B are on lots of less than 9,000 square feet. So question is, where does the 9,000 square feet come from? And is it really necessary if half of the units are on smaller lots? And, you know, if you were to change that to, let's say, 6,000 square feet, you know, could you pick up additional opportunities to create duplexes? So that was the analysis that was done.
Yeah.
You know, again, it was like the blighted properties. I don't know that we're ready for prime time, which is why I didn't include these things, but the things that we spent a lot of time talking about.
We spent a lot of time on it.
This one, you can always float it and see what people say.
Well, there is a proposal, in part of the P O C D proposal calls for making some slight changes to the very modest, we think too modest, to the zone B and zone, C aggregations. And every one of these exceptions that I looked, every one of these non-conforming ones I looked at looked to be fit quite nicely in the neighborhood. So there's some potential out there to create middle housing, and that's what this was about. Certainly still in the relatively early stages, and we're probably not ready for prime time yet, but we put a lot of work into this.
Maybe there's an opportunity to aggregate both of these bullet points under one, because we're really looking for opportunities to create additional
Right. That's,
housing opportunities.
Yeah.
Also on the, that like, where minor relative changes there. There's also data on ones that have gotten variances approved, right, recently, because I can think of at least one on Judd, where I can't believe they took 2 houses. Split and
Well, that would be
and
interesting.
that lot is.
Have you guys looked at that?
So I mean, if that when you ask, you're like, well, we're asking it also.
Just for the ADUs.
These have all been approved,
Well, there's a line of thought when you routinely grant variances, maybe you should change the regs, right?
right.
So if
Look at
none of the restaurants downtown have the required amount of parking, and you can grant a variance routinely, maybe you should lower the parking threshold, mark parking minimum. So that's,
Do they do that? Do they go and look at their variance?
we're gonna definitely put parking in before them, right, Bob?
They as a committee, like, kind of go look at their own, like.
The P O C D does make reference to doing a couple of these things, but then they have to take the next step. The P O C D is a strategic document, talks about broad visions and goals. Then you have to actually propose the text amendment to change the regs.
Can I give Brian an example that, this is close, to your neighborhood, Brian? We looked at I think it was a non-conforming 3-family house on Stratfield. White house, it was for sale for a long time, and it was in zone A. And right next to it, on the side street, was zone B.
Right.
And I believe Jim Wentz said it would be not that difficult to make that a zone B because it attached to the zone B area. I don't know how it got sold, I
It
imagine.
did. The price was very high for it. But even in a zone B, a 3-family unit is not conforming.
Yeah.
That's not permitted in zone B, only 2-family. So, it's just, you have these oddities, I guess, exceptions throughout town. And, but when a large percentage of them are non-conforming, then you have to question, what's the basis for the original regulation to begin with?
And ADUs are gonna kind of.
There were
Wrinkle
7 or
that.
8 variances that were approved through ZBA last year. And there were, I know there were additional ADUs, and Emmeline did promise that she'd get us that information in terms of the number of ADUs approved. So additional ones that went through the normal process, but ZBA, there's a lot of stuff that happens at ZBA.
We probably should perhaps add a bullet on ADUs if we can track, we started the year with X number of accessory dwelling units, we have X more in the works or applications.
I think it's a good
approved.
idea.
We've been focusing on it for a couple of years with workshops, so if we have some metrics around that, we're seeing growth in accessory dwelling units.
I know it's too late, but I think for next year, the rental things, it's only gonna You really gotta get, and we'll find the data. I talked to, I think we can get it. It's, we're building a ton of, there's a ton of rentals coming online.
Well, the other thing you should be mindful of, there is a fair rent commission at some point being handled. One of their jobs is to look at the rental market, do a rental analysis of rental. Because how else are you gonna determine whether or not something seems inconsistent in terms of the rent? So they'll need to do that, and I would think that information would be useful here as well, so.
And then the other bullet that I had, we don't need to use this necessarily, but I benchmarking and testing of potential enhancements to inclusionary zoning regs. And we've spent a lot of time with inclusionary zoning regs in terms of that work. And
Well, hopefully, we're actually gonna have a
Right.
proposal with regard to inclusionary zoning. Include next year's report, so, you know. It's totally up to you as to, and I'm happy to hear your report, so if you wanna add more bullet points.
it's the committee's report,
No,
yeah,
I meant,
yeah.
well, I'm using you collectively. as
Yeah.
My report, you're gonna have to present it.
Currently isn't language for multifamily in the zoning regs. There's not, we don't have any inclusionary requirements in there now, or we do?
Yes, we do,
10%.
10%, and in the TOD zone, 12%.
Tweaks to
And
this.
we round up, so in other words, 11 units is 2 units.
Yeah, it's always rounded up. Not less than, so it goes up to the
You're
next.
saying what you guys worked on a lot this year, what you're.
What we looked at is whether or not to change that. You know, there's been discussion about is 10%, can we up the floor? So other communities, and Steve, you had just passed around an article about Ridgefield's passage, referenced several other communities that are doing 14% or 15%. You know, there's concern about what's the impact, particularly in the current fiscal environment. You don't wanna necessarily forestall development activity. You wanna, you know, rely upon the private marketplace to produce the units, so it's a balancing act. So right now we're at 10 and 12. So one thing that we did also in your packet, a very simple thing that could be presented to planning and zoning is just lowering the thresholds. Right now, it applies to any development of 10 or more units. We've had some 9-unit apartments, not surprisingly, and 9-lot subdivisions. So we can fix that by, lowering the threshold to 5, which is also in Ridgefield. And New Canaan, I believe, also uses 5. I think Westport as well. So a very simple thing would be to just go and say, hey, it's now 5.
Yeah.
And round up 10% of 5 is 0.5 or 1.
And it's subdivision or re-subdivision, so that the one on Mill Plain, we would have gotten something. Mill Plain
Well,
is.
I don't think there wouldn't be any question, because they were arguing it was 9
Oh,
versus
right.
10.
They would
Or
argue
9.
9.
Now it's 5, so,
Oh, is it 5 now?
no.
Yep.
Suggested 5.
So, again,
I think that's
we
a
can
good idea.
debate, the 10 versus 12 versus 14. But in the meantime, you may have more 9-unit
Right.
apartments coming in, so why not? I think
Right.
the
Yeah.
planning and zoning commission would say, amen, absolutely.
I think that's.
That's a
easy.
slam dunk, so
Do that.
we should do it.
I would just add to that. So if we're saying that, let's say we're saying 350 roughly is the cost of an affordable unit. So if I build a 5-unit development, I'm going to be ponying up 350,000. So let's think of that as 70,000 per unit. If I build a 4-unit development, I can buy out with $5 per thousand as an inclusionary zoning fee. That's a heck of a lot less
Right.
than $70 per unit. I mean, it's a order of magnitude lower than $70 a unit. Isn't that something we need to address over time? I don't mean now, but isn't that something we really need to address over time?
The $5 per thousand.
Yeah, we're whatever way whatever approach we use, the fact that there's a real discontinuity in terms of the cost per unit.
Yeah.
If you think of our cost per unit curve, from 1 through, 10 and beyond, it's, like that.
And again, that only applies to developments that are not subject to our inclusionary zoning. So if you contribute an affordable unit or a payment in lieu, then you're exempt from paying that fee.
Right.
But that fee applies, and most specifically to the universities that have built a lot of campus facilities. And I would say 50 to 60% of the fees that we've collected have been a supplemental building permit fee assessed to those improvements, which was the intention, honestly. Because at the time, when we developed our first affordable housing plan, the university was saying, hey, we can't find housing for our staff. Well, help us solve that problem, So this is our answer, right? So, but it also applies to a single family home construction. It also applies to building additions, residential as well as commercial. And it's on top of other fees that we charge, whether it's INI or your regular building permit fee. So if you look at the amount of fee, the stack of fees that we attach to it, it's a little onerous.
Yeah.
So there is
Especially owners if you build 5 now.
now, if you're selling these units you're selling a house for $2 million, $3 million, you can build that into the sale price, but it is something we do need to bear in mind. It wasn't to get to a number that is equivalent to, we did the comps there. It was like, well, what's Darien doing? What's New Canaan doing? So we came up with a number we thought would stick, and we had much the same reaction as Richfield did when they passed theirs. All the home builders came out of the woodwork and said, this is gonna kill us. We're not gonna be able to build a single family home in town. We said, I think you'll figure it out. And they did.
I guess a good example of that is there's open space requirements set aside for 4 acres and 5 or 5 units. So set aside 10% or fee in lieu.
Yep.
Right,
So there is a
that-
payment in lieu option there,
Yeah,
right?
That's an overlay to
Yep.
go down to 5. You're right, 2 checks.
Anyway, if on the plan, if you want to tweak it a little bit, whatever you want to do, I just want to make sure that we get this to the RPM.
Absolutely. I would. What do committee members think about? Maybe what do you think, adding a bullet or 2?
I think it's your discretion. Entirely your discretion.
I would add the bullets and circulate it for,
Can't really do that.
Do business, I really.
Won't be doing that.
I was reminded, I was sworn up today.
yeah.
Steve made a no by sending it out to everyone and copying the town clerk.
I don't know who put her in there. I didn't put her
I
in.
sent the original one because some of this stuff does have to get noticed publicly, so.
Well,
The idea was to post
Um,
it, right? Yeah, to post it, right?
That's a silly rule.
Seems like it's out of date.
Yeah.
But I mean, but you can send a full review prior, like, you just can't, you can't.
We could send it to half the committee and then next day. to the other half.
That's funny.
It's in a packet. So you can all look at it.
Well, why don't you authorize the chair to file it on maybe
Yeah.
the necessary revisions and file on your behalf or something like that.
Yes, I trust you.
Yeah, it's
I'll work with Mark.
it's fairly minor editing.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
We're just giving them the power of the pen here, people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heavens.
We'll keep it to a couple.
It'll
of
be
bullets.
consistent with what he just outlined.
Yeah, we'll keep it to a couple of bullets.
Yeah, if it's to those things. I
And
think
Bob wants to say something about, you want to say something about the ADUs or?
Yeah, I think we should. I think if you can get data, if Emmeline was gonna look and see how many applications have we seen an uptick in permanent applications?
And remember too, you do make an oral report. to the-
Exactly, so you can
to the-
embellish.
to the RTM. And you can talk to these issues like, hey, we did this ADU, this is second workshop. As a
Right.
result of the first workshop, we saw this many units. So it's
I like tracking the number because
Yeah,
we talk about it in concept, but we don't have the data and neither does RTM. It'd be
Yeah.
good to see
Yeah, exactly.
Now
Doesn't
we're.
sound like we have the data yet either, so.
But the majority of the attendees were very interested, or, when you polled the group at each of these workshops, they had a strong interest or thought that it would apply to them. So,
Mark, you did not make the changes on the numbers.
I did make the changes on the numbers. It should reflect your numbers. 810.
No, that was 840.
Wait a second, did I put the wrong one? Well, I thought I made the changes. Apparently, I must not have saved them, so.
Happens to the best of it.
Yeah, look at that.
845.
Yeah, it's 840.
730.
I have your numbers.
Oh, okay.
I'll change those. So we'll update that numbers based on the information Steve sent out from the MLS. I'll update it, boy, wow.
Okay, we'll add a couple of bullets and we'll make sure that the ADUs are either mentioned in that or we'll verbally present it.
Okay, so we're good to go.
Okay.
Lowering the floor.
Since it's not actually done, that'll be a next year's report, I hope.
Hold in their pocket.
Right. So I included this just so you'd have, it's pretty simple. It only it changes a word, 10 to 5.
I mean, that would be, that's not something we're going to release now, right? That's something we have in our back pocket.
We didn't really-
Presentation.
We did not put it in on the agenda for this meeting, so it would be best to hold it and put it on for a special meeting, at which time we could review and approve, act upon. So we'll put it on the next month's agenda. I would argue that you should do it sooner. Because there is the potential you get another 9-unit apartment built someplace. I mean, it has happened
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yep.
I don't think that was accidental, so. And we have, again, the argument about the subdivision was, whether it was 9, well, they basically certified it was 9 lots, so. So I think sooner the better. The other thing, we have talked to the, I included the executive summary for new folks and as well as keep learning members of the housing plan. We had talked about doing a joint, I mentioned to the chair and talked to CP&Z town planner about doing a joint planning meeting with the planning and zoning commission. Some of these things are not fully baked in yet, so it might be helpful to have an informal conversation with your counterparts in planning and zoning. And for example, suggest, hey, we're thinking about this parking or changing our parking regs. This is what we're thinking. What do you think?
Yeah.
And before we actually make an application.
I think that's good.
So I think that's a good idea. We could probably develop an agenda. And I've talked to him, the town planner, a couple of times, so hopefully we can get a point in their calendar. And the only other thing I think I've shared, he did a orientation program back in, I think, 2021. I guess when you guys came
Yep,
up with.
I remember.
Were you there?
Yes, I was there.
Were you?
Nina,
I think it may have been very early 2022.
I think
It was early
was
22. Yeah.
early 22 because,
You were the
yes,
front, right?
yes,
February 2022. Here's
There's the deck.
yes.
here's the deck. So since we have a couple new members, and I know some of you are already very familiar with affordable housing, but talking about maybe having a retreat, do a overview, a quick orientation, and then do a planning meeting where we can talk about, get more in depth in terms of our goals for the year. And I'm happy to set that up. I think last time we did it at the Sullivan Independence Hall, but
Yep.
I could also see if our friends at Fairfield View, if they would host it in their, conference rooms up there, and we could do it on a Saturday morning or something like that, have coffee and type thing, and, you know, it's up to you. So that was another thought I had. Let me know. if
I
it's
think that's a
interesting.
good idea.
And it's just figuring out a
Sure
date.
is good.
Yes, for sure.
A doodle poll.
And it'd be interesting if the housing commission could be there as well. like,
Housing Authority?
Already, yeah, Carol.
We could ask the Housing Authority to join us for a portion at least, yeah.
Cause I remember I was at one of their the contentious meeting, but where they were trying to explain to many of the folks that were in attendance, just yeah, a lot of folks don't really understand terminology, yeah, and anyway, I think she's great explaining it.
So it'd be worthwhile to maybe circulate the, what you used at that last, at the 2020 session, Mark, because I think we probably have a lot of people that are going to come beyond some of the really basic stuff since that time.
Yeah, I'd
And-
want to update some stuff.
And maybe even, and let the members suggest topics that they feel that they're particularly interested in, or they think might be useful to.
Yeah.
To others, just so we really are making this as valuable as we can to everyone who's there.
And was anybody from planning and zoning there?
No,
Good.
an internal, it was an orientation.
Right.
It really turned into
It's
an
helpful.
orientation. We had a lot of
Very helpful.
a lot of people, we explained some key concepts and terms and went through some of the data, you know, statistical data. So I think we spent more of it on orientation,
Right.
but I think, you know, with the Economic Development Commission, it was, we spent a little bit more on, you know, a planning session, which I think, you know, given the fact that many of you are already familiar with some of the key concepts, we can just spend more of our time talking about that.
Yeah, although, I mean, I like those ideas. I mean, my wife put together a pension academy at the state level. And it was open. And,
Well, this will be an open meeting too.
well, and I think, but I mean, it has a lot of great, the benefits that came out of that from just folks come and the learning that, because the more educated the public is, the easier this job becomes, I think, really. I mean, or at least it puts everybody on you just don't have those misunderstandings at the beginning. And as a town, I think it'd be well served.
And that's something we can maybe address too, Brian, in the outreach that we do. So beyond this report to the RTM, we had talked about, you know, possibly a report to the Board of Selectmen, Mark, but even maybe going beyond that, I mean, even at some of the major commissions, you see people hung up on things that seem to be almost dead ends. So, you know, people get hung up on how we're gonna get to be 10% affordable. Well, the answer is
We're not.
not in our lifetimes.
Not
And,
by the math that I was looking at.
and
In your report, I was like, oh.
so there really are a lot of misconceptions out there.
And I thought-
Even on even on the commissions and committees.
And that was my biggest takeaway from the Connecticut Post article. You know, Steve and I we're depending on where you're doing, trying to do the work or stuff. I mean, it's all in context. And yeah, it's just so funny to watch it. Stuff in Bridgeport or Waterbury, you guys, if you only knew, like where the rent is the affordable rent, like the market rate rent is.
A little knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
It takes the temperature down for sure.
How come we don't have a map of the housing developments?
You can go online and find it. That's the simple answer.
You gonna
Go
tell the
online.
RTM that? No.
Yeah, you can go online.
Hyperlinking, yeah.
We provide it to the public, so you can click on each development, find a number of affordable units, the contact person, how to apply.
Well, just a map. It's a map of all the units in town. The
You
development.
can have a lot of different things in a report.
Just a map, okay.
I just said.
A picture is worth 1,000 words, somebody.
We'll include that in our TM. If we, the chair would like to do that in our B. You don't want to be the chair there, Steve?
I like that. Because people, they associate, so the one on, Black Rock. That's just approved, right? The one that's.
Well, it's under construction.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did they? What? Are they doing this today? So, are they putting units on site or they rental?
That's an 830G, yeah, that's an
Oh.
830G project, so it will be, once it's complete, it'll be 30% that'll be affordable under, for the next 40 years.
Yeah, look at the location, fantastic.
You know. Not everyone does a great job with design, so.
Well, in some ways, it's sort of like this resistance.
But yeah, there's a couple in that area that were, well, there's 3 projects we're monitoring construction. Completion of 2 of the 3 put us over the hurdle in terms of having enough points for a moratorium application. So one on Beacon Square, the 528 Black Rock Turnpike, and then 5545 Park Avenue. It's a 100-unit development next to Sacred Heart. It's coming along. So I've talked to them. They're pretty certain they'll be done. Looking for a CO in May. So I think that is our time frame. So I am working currently on the putting the documents together for the moratorium application.
Excellent.
It'll be a multi-volume set.
Nice job. Yeah.
Well, it's not done yet, so hey, don't.
Close,
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
Much closer than when we
We
first.
are very close, you know, we will see an application this year, for
That's
sure.
awesome.
This year. And then I think to your point earlier, you know, we already, as we're putting together that application, similar to what Westport did, we have a future application tab, which shows the anticipated projects that we have built over the next 4 to 5 years, based on where they are in the approval process, most of which have been approved, they just haven't been built. So we can put that into the next list, and so we'll have, part of what we want to do is have a more strategic approach
Right.
Yeah.
and be able to show everyone, the public, RTM, elected officials, you know, this is our plan. This is how we're gonna get to moratorium number 1. It's gonna gotta get to number 2.
Exactly.
And, you know, these are the projects that will deliver these number of points and when we think they're gonna come online. I mean, it's subject to change, but it's a little bit more,
Oh, it's more realistic.
more
than
real
like
than,
trying to,
right.
Let's hope we make this.
Right. I think that is something you suggested, Steve. I think we're.
And I actually got, I think it's important to understand that the first moratorium, more than half of the points are gonna come from 830G projects. And so during that moratorium, no new 830Gs are gonna get
Exactly.
built. And so it's gonna be more difficult to get the second moratorium and the third moratorium.
Because you're basically front loading.
Well,
No, not necessarily. Like if we start doing more
Right.
of the, you know, the affordable housing,
Right.
like some of the projects that,
control.
you know, that we've been working on, you know. We.
Habitat, more
Habitat,
Right, yeah,
Humanity,
yeah.
like all those different
But
projects,
there'll be some,
buildings that we're trying to do,
Right, but
those
they'll-
are gonna be affordable housing.
Truly
The
affordable.
end, like truly, instead of these 830Gs monstrosities that we find that are like, our eyes are like,
Out of cap.
that's
like out of
That's true.
character for the town.
that's true, but we'll need to do a lot of them.
Yes.
And because we'll be getting, you know, maybe a couple of affordable units from each one of them versus 10, 20, 30 from one of the big projects.
That's right, if we lower it to 5, right?
Right.
And it's something that we continue to do and are strategic in our approach as opposed to just, okay, we're at moratorium, so we're just gonna say no to everything. Then of course we're gonna fall behind. But if we don't, and we make sure that we're the ones in the driver's seat with all of the developers, it doesn't have to be that way.
The idea is to come up with a couple different tools in the toolkit so that people don't have to resort to 830G. There's another option.
Right.
So part of that is looking at our DRD overlay regulations that used to allow for more density on parcels of certain size. And that's how a lot of condominium developments got built throughout town. But, we can revisit that and hopefully revise that and
That's
provide, again, something that would be workable in terms of its density component.
And hence the urgency of middle housing and hence our discussions with planning and zoning, we want to have good discussions with them about the rationale for why we want to. Make the kind of
One thing you should
adjustment.
know, with the moratorium, it only applies to 830G set aside new applications.
Right.
So anything that was
Right.
approved
Right.
or filed before that moratorium is granted is fair
Right,
game. They can
right.
proceed. And so we have a number of projects that are out there that haven't been built, that are approved, or maybe under appeal, for example. And so, there is gonna be a percentage of those that probably will go forward and will, serve us for the second.
And they will help with moratorium number 2.
Yeah.
It'll become even more challenging when we get to moratorium number 2 and 3, and so.
I just have a question. So what, neither.
Somebody else's problem.
Somebody else's problem.
So what is the official means of communications between this body and the TPZ?
Well, I talked to my counterpart staff, Jim Went or Emmeline Harrigan. They meet with their leadership, but it could be, chair or somebody appointed by the chair could liaise with the commission or reach out to their counterparts on the commission. So, and nothing, I know we've had informal, people know one another. So if you have an informal dialogue with the commission, that's not, unless, as long as they're not talking about something that's on their current docket, they're having an ex parte conversation, that would be bad. But if you're just talking about something in general about housing, it's not actually before them, there's no reason that you couldn't talk to a planning and zoning commission member.
It's been informal largely.
Is there other things want me to report on?
Just maybe like a quick summary of the old business. I think we.
St. Emery's.
Yeah,
How much money do we have in the trust fund?
so it's.
Yes.
Half dozen.
I'm
business
prepared with
items.
that number, Steve. Yes. I just have to find it.
Was it the number that was included?
It's in the annual.
Something, I saw it.
Assuming I saved the right number.
It hasn't changed since then?
It should be, the balance is 935,818
Yeah.
with the reserve for Parkview of 319, which should come in under that. The uncommitted balance is 616,818. $616,818.
And you no longer produce this,
I do.
not for us, but
I can send it out, but it doesn't change that much from month to month, really.
What's it sitting on?
this is a list of all the developments in town. And it
They're
has,
very popular, so.
On a map?
It's not a map.
it should have a map.
Look it up online, look at the address.
I tell you, where's the trust money sit?
It's in a dedicated account with our finance department. I don't know what short bank they put it in, probably M&T or something, I don't know. But they track it. There is a lag in terms of, a lot of the 98% of the money coming into the housing trust fund is from inclusionary zoning fees, and planning and zoning records those. They get posted to our account like monthly, but there's usually a lag associated with that. So, but we're looking, basically that lag has been there all along. So it's an apples to apples comparison. So we'll catch up. I can send out the most recent.
I think it'd be good for.
I would appreciate that.
New members.
There are a couple, there are a couple new projects that are making, so we have 4 projects in litigation.
Really?
92 Bronson, 15 Umpqua, 277 Berkeley, and 131 Beach Road.
High Street is not in litigation?
Oh, I'm sorry, High Street as well. So I'm 980 High Street, because I was looking at planning and zoning. 980 High Street was a appeal of a wetlands approval.
Yeah.
There is 2 projects that are pending. 110 Woodrow, which is currently before the Planning and Zoning Commission. The hearing was continued until February. There is apparently some discussions between an attorney representing a neighborhood group and the developer. They apparently have reached some accommodation. And so they're gonna come in with a slightly revised plan. So it was proposed as a 23 unit development. There's been conversation that will be reduced to a 20 unit development. With some additional landscaping, buffer, and some other concessions they were looking for. And, the Planning and Zoning Commission, in all fairness, could have dealt with that as a condition of approval, with both parties agreeing to it, but I guess they're coming back with a revised site plan to accomplish this.
So they can build with 3 fewer units, there'll be 1 fewer affordable units.
This is one right off
Off the exit right.
Does it include the restaurant or is it just that part?
No, it's just a empty lot next.
So they've saved some money basically to be able to do landscaping.
Yeah, so it's not a bad, if it lets the project go forward, it's not that big a change. The other one, it was, there's a project at 222 Stilson that went through code review. Formal plan hasn't been filed yet. It's next to a condominium development, it's off Black Rock Turnpike.
Oh, the one that was Rehab Associates, I think, next to McDonald's?
No, it's the other side of the street.
Yeah.
That's Katona Drive, and I'll get to
Right,
that.
right, 222 Stilson, all right, I'm already looking.
Stilson,
right next to the Oaks.
yeah, this is, yeah.
Oh,
it's
okay.
actually-
In the Oaks.
It's actually part of that development.
Trader Joe's thing.
There's an existing house there, which is
Big house.
dilapidated.
Mhm.
They're gonna tear that down and they're proposing to tear that down and build,
222.
I think, a 24 unit
It's a wetland right
development. There is wetlands, so they need to go wet before wetlands.
Wait, they're
Oh.
knocking down 1,024.
Yeah, it's a big lot, but there are wetlands there that they have to work around. So it's a bit of a process still. It's just not,
But it faces, it's right across from the ballpark kind of area. It's,
yeah. So that's out there, and then 60 Katona is an office conversion. It's not an 830G, it would be covered under our inclusionary. They would convert a Class C office building, 20,000 square foot to 18 units of residential. So we think that's a good project.
Yeah.
And then, I know Steve, I don't know if you actually attended the Planning and Zoning Commission, but they had a concept review for another project on.
Andre?
Andre's thing, the mixed use, yeah.
That's this parcel. That's good. And I guess this
Oh.
went pretty well. They were talking about it's a mixed use development. About 40 units. I think I'll scroll down here, but
Oh.
that's what it would look like. So, it's on a section of Post Road, so it fronts a commercial.
Or clapboard and shingle.
We'll see, so the Planning and Zoning Commission allows for applicants to make an informal pre-application to get some feedback on something that doesn't quite fit within the regs. They want to get some feedback from the commission informally. So they did that. In the next step, assuming, things go well, they would then refine their plan and come forward with a formal application.
It's not 830G.
I don't know how he's gonna get to where he's looking for without, making some accommodation of some sort. So I don't know if he's talking 830G or whether he would just tweak the reg somewhat to allow for this kind of.
Very full on the lot.
Yeah, he's talking about as many as 30% affordable.
or higher.
Or
You know, I don't know
higher.
how he would make the numbers work, but he's an architect, not a financial guy. So.
Yeah, these are just studios and one bedrooms, I think.
Yes, studios and one bedrooms. It's talking studios and one bedrooms.
Is that the,
No, it's not.
I know.
that's the car dealership?
No, it's next to there's a cigar
Store.
Oh, okay, the vacant lot.
Vacant lot.
It's across from-
Christmas trees.
And then they're talking about the development across, is that across the street?
Side.
Yeah, the,
Excide's
Right,
being
private
proposed
to-
for a ground lease to a
Right.
Penske Auto Group for a
Yep.
Porsche dealership. So
That's it? Just a Porsche dealership?
that's the Porsche dealership, get your cars.
Dumbest thing I've.
That's.
As if the one down on Commerce didn't.
This is not what they need, so.
Sure doesn't sound like a great investment to me, but.
So that's it for proposed application. I'll send out the moratorium status report for everyone. Parsons Town, the earth and get approved their acquisition of 376 Quincy. So hopefully we'll close before the end of the month. Hope to get the development agreement with Habitat and sort of art by the end of the month, and then we would negotiate a ground lease with them.
And are you still using Jim?
Yes.
Jim Scaramoza is the attorney for us, for the development agreement.
Nothing, Greenfield Street, they're moving ahead now with the framing part. And then St. Emery School, there was an offer made, accepted by the diocese for private development. They're in their due diligence period. I've talked to the developer to see if there is any possibility that we could work with them. It's very hard because the diocese asked for a lot of money, and the offer that was accepted was $2.1 million cash. And so if I pointed this out to the church,
70
you
years.
know, if you do, yeah, exactly. You do the math, that's what kind of development you would get. And it's an 830G, it's it's a 3-4 story development over a podium, 70 units plus. And they're like, I said, well, it's all based, it's math, straight on land cost. And so, I don't think that that's what we necessarily want in that area, especially given you have Castle.
Yeah, it's already
43
overdeveloped.
units and
It's a
28
one.
Yeah.
Like that.
so the question, I guess, the question we have is whether there's an opportunity to come up with a project that the neighborhood and town could support. And what the delta is between, given the land cost and what your construction and development costs would be and what you would want in way of affordable units. It produces a gap. And is it worthwhile for the town to figure out, working with a development partner that is interested, even if they're a for-profit, figuring out ways in which to close that gap, to come up with a project that is much more palatable. I don't know, it's probably a fool's errand, I would say. It's probably too much. There's probably too much of a gap because by the time you reduce it in scope and scale, it makes sense. What's really driving this is $2.1 million for a 1 acre lot in that area is just a lot of money. And I don't mind, everyone wants to get fair value for their property and as much as they possibly can. But there is a point at which it becomes a little bit too much.
Would they entertain a ground lease?
Well, I think so, there are different, but I think one of the things we have to do is first see whether or not there's a possibility. Sometimes, as I explained, working with a development partner that, you understand where they're coming from. And so if there's an opportunity to work with them, it might be better than just opening up to another group that may not be as willing to work with the town.
Do you know the developer?
I do.
Yeah. Can you say
I
who?
will
the-
not say.
Okay,
But I've met with them and again, we've been perfectly candid. But, and both parties have been candid. And I just don't know if we can come up with, I said I would try. I would think about it, ways in which we could maybe work in a true partnership to come up with something, but I just think it might be too much. And he acknowledges this too. So the risk that we have is if you say, okay, I'm gonna walk away, then they find some other developer who's not quite as community minded, willing to work with the town, wants to do something and is willing to fight it out with an 830G application. So that's the downside. So I think it's worth at least exploring it and seeing if there is a possibility. But the other thing would be to, again, there's what the church wants for the property and what Carol was willing to pay for the property based on her development plan. And, what's that gap? And could we plug that gap? So, the other possibility would be, structure something where this guy walks away and we bring in Carol with some additional support that would get close to what they want for the property. And we do something that way. So there's a lot of different possibilities, yeah, but
She already had it, 1 million in the state that was.
yeah, it's really, Carol, her original plan was, I think 22 units on this site. And, she was willing to pay a lot more than.
it's like 1 million, I think, was
It
it?
was, over 1 million.
Yeah.
So, and that's like $50,000 a unit for dirt. And that's on the high end, but she's willing to do that. And again, she works at it's a density that is more than what we allow, but it's less than what a private developer does. And what she does is create, 80 to 100% affordable versus
Right.
20 to 30% affordable, so.
I have one other broad question. Do you have any demand data or statistics like for affordable for seniors, affordable for middle, basically just a guide? Would Carol have that?
Yeah, we do have some. It's,
To me, like a gap for senior stuff. Like I know we have there's stuff on Villa that, it's probably through the.
Carol, obviously, all the developments that we have, affordable units have, if they have waiting lists,
Yeah.
they all have waiting lists if they allow for waiting lists.
Seniors is-
And they're fairly lengthy, especially for
Interesting.
senior units, because
Years.
people don't turn over as much, maybe. And then just anecdotal, I can literally, not a week goes by that somebody doesn't call looking for housing, so.
Mark, on the inclusionary zoning developments, they don't have to maintain a waiting list.
They don't have to create a waiting list. If I were doing it, I wouldn't want a waiting list. I don't want a waiting list. I don't want to manage a waiting list.
It's when it becomes available, they publicize it, and that's it.
Right.
I mean, FCCHO, I think developed data.
Yeah.
Some that I thought that Carol was largely relying upon that in terms of making the case for the extent of need of affordable housing, but I'm not sure what level of detail. I thought it was both doing. I thought
A lot of it is based on, housing. I forget what the term is, but basically we're just paying more than 30% of your. So to me, yes, I've been at that position in a lot of my life where I'm paying more than 30% of my income towards housing. A lot of us in the room probably have been in a similar situation.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we're not housed. We obviously have housing. We're paying more than what, we might want to.
It's a function of income.
So it's cost burden is and then over 50% is severely cost burden. And so a lot of housing advocates are using that as a basis for housing demand. Yes, that's to a point, but those folks are housed, a lot of those.
I was just thinking along the lines of specific. So if Carol would do something that was oriented towards seniors. Cause that area you're just speaking to, that neighborhood or whatever, and, you know. Yep.
On Bureau Street, you mean?
The one, yeah, the school.
St. Emery's.
Well, so that's a good question for this group because, you know, again, if we're trying to maximize our points in the eyes of the state, the honest answer to that, we don't get as many
We don't
points
get
for
points
senior
for
housing. So if you age restrict the housing, you only get half a point for a unit. So if you build family rental housing, even if it's a studio or one bedroom, that's entirely appropriate for a senior, and in fact, many seniors do live in it, you get a 1.5 points for it. So it's better for us not to age restrict the housing. And when Carol redeveloped Pine Tree, she lifted the age restrictions, even though the tenant base is
Right.
still largely seniors and folks with disabilities.
Well,
But we
once
get more points for
we
it.
get
So I
the
would-
moratorium,
Yeah.
then we can focus on, I mean, personally, I think that's really important
I mean,
I think it's very important for us to build housing
for
that's
seniors.
for seniors,
Yeah.
whether you have it as
We
age
don't have
restricted.
to- Yeah,
Right.
like, we don't label it that. like,
Right,
but
If you-
we
right,
Make it with the right, requirements
right.
for that accessible enough for
Right.
them. that
Seniors
they'll
need
be-
something that
Right.
is, attainable, has some
Right.
accessibility,
Yeah, no
grab
bathrooms,
bars.
just,
But they don't need a 3-bedroom apartment,
It's
right? So
Your supermarket and.
a lot of these developments that are, we've just talked about tonight would really be senior friendly, I think.
Yeah.
So,
that's the word, senior friendly. We want to create senior friendly
Friendly,
housing.
very good. What is our right word?
okay, I think
Should
we're.
I wipe everyone out?
Sorry, no, I
Okay.
just need to. yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
The chairs are terrible.
Well, I've got the question. So I have some articles. Am I allowed to send the articles out
Yes, you
to
can.
everybody?
Don't copy the town clerk.
No more.
And we're not
No
just-
more sending pictures.
Right.
I did. Go up and read it.
No, I don't think it's a problem sharing information.
Right.
It's a problem if you're discussing something that should be an open forum. So to share a newspaper article, I don't think there's a violation.
I'll send some stuff.
Please keep doing that, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
All I
you.
do for that.
That's right.
I appreciate getting those articles.
Don't we have to say the whole thing, like motion?
Motions, to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Make a motion.
How much do we have to say?
We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.